How to lure the reader into loving your protagonist. How can this be done? What can you do as a writer to make the reader feel and love your protagonist and want to read your entire novel right to the very end? We're going to be answering those questions and more, and we're starting right now. As an amateur writer, what are the few little tricks that you can put into your novel that will make the reader love your protagonist and care about them and be concerned for them and want to read your book until the very end? One of the tricks is to make your character the underdog. We all relate to the underdog. When you watch a sporting event, we tend to cheer for the team that is not chosen to win. We want to cheer for the underdog. Maybe you're watching a horse race and there's a horse whose odds are 2-1, and there's another horse who's 500-1. We end up cheering for that horse who's 500-1 because people tend to relate to the underdog. We feel as though we are them. When we look at someone who is perfect, we feel as though we cannot connect with someone like that. Chances are the person who is perfect ends up being the villain. How many movies have you seen where someone who is absolutely perfect, has everything given to them, ends up being the bad guy? But the person in the movie who has nothing, who has to work hard, they're the protagonist. They're the ones we end up watching and cheering for. If you were to reverse it and make the protagonist the perfect person and the villain the underdog, chances are no one's going to want to watch that movie or read a book like that. Right off the bat, you want to make your villain bigger and stronger than the protagonist. Regardless if it's a drama, a comedy, or horror novel, you want to make the villain meaner, bigger, and more arrogant than the good guy. The good guy needs to save the cat, help someone, do something that is selfish. You want your character to help others and not look for rewards in the end. Because this is something that we can connect with. We connect with people who are kind to others, who are being treated badly by others. We can identify with that as though it is us. When you see a character in a novel who is willing to help kittens and puppies and children, but yet society treats them badly, we automatically start to care about that type of protagonist, because this is someone who is willing to help others, but yet others are mean to them. And we can't help but feel as though that's us. We feel as though life is mean to us, even though we're trying so hard to help others. And if you put this into your novel, it can actually benefit you. The fact is, people don't see themselves as being perfect. If you were to ask people to list their negative traits, that list can go on forever. And when you create a character who doubts, who's insecure, when you allow the reader into the mind of the protagonist, so we can think what they're thinking, we know what they're thinking, we know what they're feeling. When someone has to give a speech in front of a large crowd, and all you do is mention that the character walks in front of the stage and speaks and walks off, we don't have any connection. But if you, as the writer, allow us to have insight into the character's mind before they give the speech, so we feel their nervousness, we understand their doubt. Even though they're smiling on the outside, they might be thinking something nervous or negative on the inside. And as a writer, when you give the reader insight into what a character is thinking and feeling, we then connect with them. We feel as though it is us. So when a character has to give a speech and they're nervous, we can identify with that. We've all been there. And the more you give insight into a character's thoughts and emotions and their doubts and their questions and their worries, the more we feel as though we are connecting and we start cheering for that protagonist. We want them to do well. We see them as the underdog. We see them as us. We can identify with them. And it's when you create that bond between the reader and the protagonist as though they are one, this is what's going to make the reader want to turn the page. Not to see how the protagonist solves the problem, but how they themselves, as the reader, will solve the problem. All characters are complex. All people in life are complex. Everybody has a universe within their own mind. But the funny thing is, when we step outside our front door, we just have a smile on our face like everybody else does. We walk down the street thinking everybody else in life is happy and down to earth and everything is fine. And we feel as though we're the only ones who have doubts, who have worries about life. So we go through life acting as though everything is fine. But what we don't realize is that everybody else around us is thinking and feeling the same thing. They too have doubts and worries, but when they look at you, they see your smile and they think you're fine, and they wish they were you, and you're wishing you were them. And it's this complexity that when you as a writer capture in your novel, within your characters, this is what's going to make the reader really connect with your story. Because they're not reading a story about just someone walking down the street. You as the writer have created insight into their mind and how they are thinking that they have problems and everybody else is happy. And you as the reader think, hey, that's me. I'm like that as well. I walk down the street with a smile on my face to blend in, but I have all these thoughts going on inside of my head. All of these thoughts and worries and concerns. And when you create a character where you give insight into the character's mind, this is going to pull the reader into the novel as though it is real, as though it is happening around them. It's like putting on those virtual reality glasses and you feel as though everything is real that's happening. As a writer, this is what you want to strive for. You don't want to make your book feel like it's a newspaper where you're just telling the reader what happened. You want to make the reader feel as though this has happened, as though it's really happening to them, and incorporate the five senses. You don't want to just tell the reader what they're seeing. You want the reader to think, feel, and interact with everything around them. So when the wind blows, the reader feels as the wind is moving across them. If it's cold outside, you want the reader to feel cold. If it smells like someone's cooking a barbecue, you want the reader to be able to smell that. You want to make your book come alive and make the reader feel as though the story is happening to them. The more you allow the reader into the mind and the self-doubts and the questions that we all have, it's like, as a writer, you want to study psychology. Some of the best writers in the world study psychology. They want to understand how the mind works. When you read a newspaper, you're just being told what someone's done. But a novel pulls you into the complex universe within the mind itself. Everyone around you looks like they don't have a complex mind, but everybody is the star of their own movie. And we feel as though everyone around us is just co-stars. But everybody feels that way. Everybody is the center of their own universe. Everybody has thoughts, interactions with who they are and what's going on around them. And as a writer, when you create and you allow the reader into the mind, and the reader can understand the thoughts and the questions and the worries of the protagonist, that's going to make them feel at one. And so when you create obstacles, when you create a goal, all of a sudden the reader is on that path. It is their goal, and they now have to square off against the antagonist. When the antagonist is big and scarier, the reader feels as though the antagonist is after them. Even when you read a book about rabbits called Watership Down, it's a book about rabbits. How can the reader connect with rabbits? But it's not about just rabbits running around in a field. These rabbits have thoughts, fears, worries. They have goals, objectives. They have something that they're after. So when you read Watership Down, you feel as though you have connected with the fears and the emotions and hopes and dreams that are being expressed in rabbits. You're not connecting with the rabbits themselves, but you identify with their hopes and fears, and you fear the antagonist. When the big bad rabbits are after them, You worry for them because you feel as though those rabbits are after you. Because it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody puts themselves into a movie or the novel that they are watching or reading. When you watch Indiana Jones, you're not watching someone else. That's you. When you read a James Bond novel, you will put yourself into that novel. As a writer, you have to understand, everybody who reads your book is going to put themselves into your protagonist. They're going to think and feel what your character is thinking and feeling. This is why Gone with the Wind was so successful, because everybody who read it felt as though they were Scarlett O'Hara. They and Margaret Mitchell gave us insight into Scarlett O'Hara's mind, thoughts, and emotions. Therefore, when you read Gone with the Wind, you are in that novel. It is happening to you. So you want to know how this problem is going to be resolved, because it's not happening to Scarlett, it's happening to you. As a writer, you must always remember that anytime you write a story, the reader is going to put themselves into the mind of the protagonist. And the more you can give insight into their thoughts and emotions, the more the powerful connection the reader is going to have with your protagonist, making them at one and wanting to know how the problem is going to be resolved. One of the greatest examples of this is just reading a Stephen King novel. He has this ability to create everyday, regular people who we identify with, as though they are us. So when Stephen King creates the big bad monster, we feel as though that monster is after us. When you read a Stephen King novel, you're not reading about somebody else. You feel as though it is happening to you. Because Stephen King allows us insight into the mind of the protagonist. We know what they are thinking and feeling and questioning. So we feel as though we have become at one with them. So when they step out their front door and the big bad monster comes after them, all of a sudden we feel as though the monster is after us. This is why stories about middle-class families and middle-class people do so well as novels, because the majority of people are for middle class, and they identify. They feel as though it is happening to them. If you write about rich people living in Beverly Hills, the majority of people reading cannot identify with that. The more regular and down to earth you create your protagonist, the more the reader can identify as though it is them. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a tremendous number of blogs that will help you become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below, and you can go there and check out my website right now. And if you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my next video, where we answer the question, where do writers get their ideas from? And how can it help you as a writer knowing this? In fact, I'm going to leave a link to that video right here, and you can click on that video right now and start watching.